makers, Lisa here from Andrie Designs. I just wanted to pop a quick tutorial together today to show you two different ways you can finish off the end of your exposed zipper. So for the top main zipper of bags, sometimes the end is exposed and we need to put a tab or something on it to conceal the raw edge of the zipper tape and just give it a really professional and polished look. So there's two fabric ways that you can do this, and throughout the tutorial I'm going to show you both ways. The first way is a narrow zipper tab, such as on this V pouch. And so throughout the tutorial I've taken an excerpt from the Classic Clutch video class to show you how to create a lovely little fabric tab where the zipper is folded in and reduced in width. And it just makes it's really nice just for little pouches and small bags and things. The other option I'm going to show you in the tutorial is for a wide tab, such as on this Shades of Yesterday tote bag. This retains the width of the zipper itself, is easier to construct and apply, but obviously has quite a different look and is more suitable for tote bags and larger bags instead of your small pouches and clutches. So two different ways to finish off the end of your zipper, no hardware required, just a few scraps of fabric. I'll put cut measurements in the description below, as well as links to the patterns I'm working on as well. So for now, let's get started. So to prepare your zipper tab ready to install on your clutch, first what we're going to do is take our last piece of fabric that's been waiting patiently to be used. We're going to place it right side down on our pressing table, and we're just going to fold the short ends over 1/2 inch, and we're going to give them a press. What I also like to do for these folded ends is to glue them in place, or you could tape them just to hold them down so that they don't move as we're folding the rest of the tab up and then installing the tab on our zipper. And I'm just going to set the glue with my iron, just like that. So from here we need to draw a line down the center lengthwise to mark the center, and that is where we're going to fold the two long sides into, ready to then narrow down our zipper tab. So just taking a ruler, it is going to be 3/4 inch in from one side. So just draw a little bit of a line down there so you've got somewhere to fold the edges into. And then just like for the short edges, we're going to fold those edges into that line, and we're going to give it a good press on both sides. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to fold our zipper tab in half. So the sides that has the opening with the long edges, we're going to fold those right sides together. So essentially we have finished edges on all sides of our little zipper tab, and we have two openings at the end, one of which the zipper will poke into. So matching up your short finished edges, we're just going to give that last crease a nice little press with our iron. And our zipper tab is almost ready to install on our zipper. So from here you need to choose which side of the tab you want to be the right side or the top, and which side will be underneath the zipper. For this clutch I'm making, I think I'm going to have the green and orange side as my right side, which means looking at the end, this pocket up here is my top pocket, and that is where my zipper is going to go. So this pocket down here, we can actually glue these long sides down to hold that flat, so it's one less thing to move on us when we install the tab onto our zipper. Just like that. So the top pocket is sitting there waiting to be used, the back of the tab is nice and flat with folded tidy edges, and now it's time to move on and prepare the end of our main zipper ready to install our tab onto it. So to tidy up the end of our main zipper, first what we need to do is close our clutch up all the way. And then what we're going to do, what I find easiest, is to actually lay the clutch on its side, so the closed end of the zipper, or the tail, is essentially just sitting out and away from the clutch like this. Obviously I'm left-handed, so that's the side I prefer the tail to come out on. If you're right-handed, you'll probably find it easier to come out this side. So just sitting the clutch there nice and upright so we're looking at the right side of the zipper. I'm just going to take a ruler and we're going to measure out from essentially where the zipper starts to come out, so that 90-degree corner, that's where we're going to start measuring from. It doesn't have to be overly exact. And from there we're going to make 3 marks along our zipper. So the first mark we're going to make is at 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark on both sides of the zipper tape there. The second mark is going to be 2.5 inches along, so 1 inch further than the first mark, like that. And our third mark is going to be 3 inches along. So once you have your 1.5, 2.5 and 3 inch marks, we can pop our ruler to the side, take our scissors or rotary if you'd like to do it that way, and cut off any extra zipper tape so that we really shorten up our zipper and it's just a much nicer proportion to our clutch. And just like that. So from here we have a nice fairly straight end of the zipper, and what we're going to do is fold the zipper into thirds and hand, or you can machine stitch it closed, ready to install the tab. So to do that, what I like to do is have the closed end right near me, and actually in opposite to what we just did, have it sitting so that the open end of the zipper and that side seam is sitting down on our work surface. And from here we can kind of bend the zipper up, and we're going to fold one side in approximately 1/3 of the way across. Then we're going to fold the other side in, again 1/3 of the way across, and we want to make sure that these marks we've just made overlap so we know our zipper is nice and square, or the zipper tape I should say. And once you've folded your zipper tape into thirds, holding it in place, just tip it forward. And as you can see, my teeth actually are heading, they're looking good at the cut end, but over here they're actually heading off to the left hand side. They're not parallel down the zipper tape. So I'm just going to adjust that so that they are sitting more parallel down the zipper tape, and it just gives a more uniform finish. So I'll fold that back over. That looks much better there, so I'm much happier with that. So what I'm going to do prior to stitching to hold these in place is I'm just going to grab a couple of clips and I'm just going to put them across, ready to hold it in place, ready to stitch. So we're going to stitch at those marks we made. So at the furthest mark out, I'm going to take, I prefer just to hand stitch it, I just find it easier. However, if you want, you can machine stitch it, it's really up to you. And this stitching here that I'm about to do will stay in place once the tab is installed. So if you have fabric on your zipper tab that is a little bit more transparent, or a clear vinyl or something, you'll need to use a thread here that matches your zipper tape so it kind of blends in and isn't seen. So I'm just stitching on either side of the teeth, just looping up and around just a handful of times to make sure the tape is really well secure and nicely folded. And then I'm going to trim off and knot, knot the end of my threads. So that's the first mark stitched closed. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process for my second mark. Now these stitches will be removed once our tab is installed, and prior to stitching I'm just going to check that everything looks parallel down here and it's all held in place well with the clip. So I'm really happy with that, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch at that second closer mark as well. So once you have your two marks in place, or you've stitched, your zipper tape in place at your two marks, you can take your clips off. We know that everything's going to be held in place and we can get ready to install our zipper tab on the end of our zipper. So to install our tab on the end of our zipper tape, first what we're going to do, and this is where sewing glue or a glue stick really comes in handy, just going to place a bit of glue on the teeth about 1 inch down from the cut end of the zipper, and also on either side, just on this top side first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slide our tab on, we're going to put the end of the zipper into that top pocket, and as we go we want to try and make sure that the teeth of the zipper are nicely centered in that tab. We're going to make sure that the cut end of the zipper tape comes to just before the fold in the zipper tab. So you might need to kind of wiggle it around to get that alignment. And in this case, because we can't see what we're doing, so to speak, it's more a case of feeling to check how things are lining up. So I can see my folds, and I can feel that the teeth are fairly well down the center actually. Doing this sort of zipper tab does take a little bit of practice, unfortunately, and I've myself plenty of times have had to recut them and redo them, but it does pay off and it gives a really cute little finish for the bag at the end. So once we've lined up the teeth down at the center of that top side of the zipper tab, what we can do is just apply a little bit of heat, and I'm barely touching it onto the fabric just to help set that glue without squishing the fabric into the teeth. And then what we can do is look at the underside, and what we want to do here is fold the sides over into the center, again making sure that it is nice and parallel down each side of the zipper and the zipper tab. So just placing some glue on the back there on the zipper tab. I'm just going to fold one side over at the fold line I've made and sort of tack it down. Same on the other side. And I'm just going to have a feel. Feels fairly parallel down there actually, I'm quite happy with that. Squeeze that down into the glue, but before I set that with the iron, I'm just going to check on the right side again. That looks really good, I'm quite happy with that actually. So once you've got the back side of your tab stuck in place, again just give it a little bit of heat to set the glue. And once that's tacked down, what we can do is place a bit of glue on the remaining flap of our tab and glue it in place. So a nice amount of glue along there. So we're going to fold that down and onto the back of the zipper tab, making sure the folded edges meet at the bottom, the short folded edges, and the side folded edges. Looks good from the back. I'm going to check from the front. It looks good. The sides are meeting, the back isn't poking out too far on either side further than the front. That looks really good. And I can actually feel I didn't quite push my zipper in far enough. There's a little bit of a gap there between the end of the zipper tape and the fold, but honestly I'm not going to take it off and fix it up for 1/8 of an inch. If it was more like 1/4, I would redo it, but that small amount is not going to matter at all. So I'm happy with that, so I'm going to pop it down and give it a good little press to set the glue. So from here, once your zipper tab is glued in place, come with me, we'll head to the machine and we will stitch to attach. So to stitch our tab in place, you're going to need a normal or walking foot on your machine. That is what I found is easiest to use. I have my needle set all the way to the left, so I'm stitching down the left-hand edge of the foot, I suppose, and then I use a height compensation tool to balance out the right-hand side. I've just found that easier through trial and error because of the teeth on the zipper. However, for you, you may find it easier to use a different foot and or a different needle setting. We're going to stitch with an approximate 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and a top stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Because we're top stitching, we're going to make one stitch forward and back to start and finish, and we will knot our threads off on the back at the end. So first we're going to stitch across this folded end of the tab, so just lining up your tab under your foot, making sure that needle is right in the corner, just like that. And all we're going to do is just drop our needle. Make sure you have your needle set to the needle down position. And I'm just going to make one stitch forward and back to lock my threads in. And you'll probably find you need to pull the tails of your thread at this point to help guide the tab under the foot as well, just because it's a small fiddly little piece of fabric. I'm just going to put that under there. Oh, nope, that didn't want to stay. All right, I'm going to stick it under the back of my foot instead. There we go. Okay, so stitching across the top folded edge of our tab, nice and slowly, using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When you get to that first corner, you can almost check underneath to have a look and make sure you're right in that corner, and it's going to give a nice square turn. When you're happy with that, turn your clutch. You have to kind of keep your clutch nicely squished, but that's okay. We will reshape at the end. And once you've turned, we're going to stitch down this first side, again using a 1/8 of an inch allowance. When you get to the open folded end, make sure you're nice and close to it, but that you've caught the underside as well. And I think I'm good there, so I'm going to lift, and this time I'm actually just going to reverse across the bottom edge of the tab there, instead of trying to squish my clutch in all its bulk in this space. So I'm just going to reverse nice and straight, put reverse on, nice and straight back across the bottom of my clutch, and go nice and gently across the teeth, especially if you've got metal teeth, right into that back corner. So I'm going to have to just adjust that there. Take reverse off, turn, and then we're going to stitch up this final side back to where we started. So when you get back to where you started, just make one stitch forward and back to partially lock your stitches in, and then you can take your tab out and have a look. Don't be too hard on yourself if it is a little bit wibbly wobbly. As I said before, these are fiddly to do and take a bit of practice, but on the whole, as long as you've caught all the edges in that stitching, then you will be fine. So that looks pretty good. It could be a little bit better, but for the sample I'm not going to fuss too much. The stitching somewhat blends in with the fabric, so I'm okay to leave it like that. So from here we're going to pop back to our work surface and finish off our tab. So now that we've stitched our zipper tab in place, all that's left to do to finish that off is pass our top threads through to the bottom, knot them off and duck them down in between the layers of fabric to hide them. And then the last thing we need to do is just remove the stitching that we placed to temporarily hold the zipper tape folded. So this is just the stitching that's at the end here that we can see. So I'm just unpicking those hand stitches. And then our zipper can sort of pop back to where it wants to sit, and that is all that is left for our classic clutch. So first what we're going to do is we're going to take our zipper tab piece, and this is our small little rectangle that has interfacing on the back. We're going to fold it in half, right sides together, matching short raw edges, and you're going to pin or clip, and I'm just going to place one little clip down the side there, and then you're going to pop over to your machine and you're going to stitch to join down this short edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched down your zipper tab to join the short edges, just pop your fingers on the inside of it and use your thumbs to help flatten out that seam, essentially pressing that seam open, but you're just using your fingers for this part. Just give it a good squeeze, just like that. That looks really good. So pop that to the side just for a moment, and what we're going to do is measure and trim off the excess zipper on our recessed zipper panel. So working from the short folded end of your panels on the closed end of your zipper, we're going to measure out 1.5 inches and 2 inches, and we're going to make marks on the zipper tape. So I'm going to start with 1.5, and I'm just going to place my ruler right at the edges of those folds, and then I'm going to mark on my zipper tape where that comes to. just like that. And then I'm going to repeat that for 2 inches as well. Trying to make it all nice and square with each other. Oops. Just like that. So once you've got your 2 marks in place, you can go ahead and take your scissors, or you can rotary if you're on a rotary surface with your cutter. And we're going to cut off the excess zipper tape at that 2-inch mark. So I'm just going to use my pinking shears, my dressmaking shears. Try and get that cut as straight as you can. So from here we can install our zipper tab. So what I find easiest and what we're going to do is essentially the zipper tab is going to sit like this with the seam down the center, but it will obviously be right side out when it's finished. So to position it, we're going to essentially thread the tab onto the end of the zipper. Make sure that the seam you've used on your zipper tab is down so that it is essentially towards the wrong side of your zipper, or your zipper panel, sorry. And we're just going to pop the zipper into the tab, and then you'll need to bunch up your tab, because what we want to do is make sure that this outer raw edge of the zipper tab comes up to the 1.5 inch marks that we've made just before. So you'll have a little bit of bunching, that's only temporary, don't worry. And then just make sure on the wrong side of the zipper panel that your seam on the zipper tab is down the center as much as you can with the teeth of the zipper. And then once you've got the alignment and you're happy with it, just pin the zipper tab in place as best you can to make sure it stays there. So that's nice and square, and my seam is down the center where the teeth are. So that's really good. So once you've got your zipper tab in place, pause the video, you're going to head over to your machine and you're going to stitch to attach using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that 1/2 inch seam allowance is measured in from the raw edge of the zipper tab. If you want to look at it a different way, you're stitching 1 inch in from the edge of the zipper tape itself. Either or, you're going to get the same result. I like to use the fabric as my guide. So you're going to stitch 2 to 3 times across here, especially over the teeth, to make sure there's a really good join. And you're going to use the 1/2 inch allowance from the edge of your fabric on your zipper tab. Make sure that's stitched really well. Use a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once your zipper tab is stitched in place, it should be looking something like this. And if need be, you can trim the end of your zipper tape if you have any loose threads, and even consider using a lighter to seal the ends, or some fray check or something, just to stop it fraying out while we complete this last step of the zipper tab. So from here, all we need to do is just pull the zipper tab off the end of the zipper, nice and carefully. And just make sure that everything is sitting nice and square. So you want to make sure that across here on both sides is nice and flat. It's pulled out nice and level. And when you're happy with that, just give it a bit of a press to help set that new little seam that we've just made. So from here, all that's left to do is finish off this raw edge of the zipper tab. To do that, we're simply going to fold it in on itself 1/2 inch right up to the end of the zipper tape, and then press it, glue it down and stitch it in place. To do that, it can be a little bit fiddly, but the easiest way I've found is to work on these long sides first and then fussy with the corners after that. So working on the front, all you're going to do is just fold the front of that over and down into the pocket, folding it over the front of the zipper tape. And just give it a bit of a finger press on either side of that zipper tape where you can feel the teeth, and then you've got the tape. Once you've got that folded, turn your zipper panel over and repeat that for the back, again trying to keep the seam allowance nice and flat, and this time the fold is going to go behind the zipper tape, essentially sew it as right sides together with the fold we just made. So just tucking that in and just give it a bit of a half squeeze. We kind of want to set it but not completely, so we may need to change it shortly. So once you've got those two bits tucked in, we're going to work on the sides. So just squeezing your zipper tab sides together to kind of open it out a little bit. You can pull them out and then very carefully just work in on that side to help create a nice tidy fold. Just like when we create handles and things and we get our nail in there to recreate the fold and really get a nice crisp edge, that's what we're doing here as well. So you can see how this side I haven't done and it wants to bunch up. This side I have put my nail in and my finger and it's sitting nice and flat. So we're going to repeat that for this side as well. Pull them apart and feel the fabric and make sure it sits and folds nice and square. Retuck the front if need be. Mine just tried to creep out a little bit. And what you're aiming for here is to have a nice square of fabric. So if that means that you need to pull a little bit out or tuck a little bit more in here or there to get that square finish, that's absolutely fine. As long as once you are happy with it and you give it a press with the iron, it is as square as you can get it. It can be fiddly and it does take a bit of practice, but if you persist, usually you'll result in a nice tidy zipper tab. And it's the small things that count in a bag, right? The little details. So I'm just checking from the wrong side as well, and I actually want the underside of my zipper tab to come almost to that front fold, but not quite, because I don't want it visible from the front. I want it to be hidden. So that's sitting really nice. I'm just gonna, does it feel funny? You can actually feel it with your fingers if it's sitting flat or if it's bunched, I find. So that's square across the back. Across the front, just tuck that bit in there. That's pretty good as well. I'm quite happy with that. It is harder if you haven't cut your zipper tape nice and square, because that is essentially the edge that we're folding up to. But I think overall that's pretty good. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a press. Just tuck that bit back in, just to help set those folds. And that's looking really good. So before we pop over and stitch that closed, just let that cool down a bit. I find it really helps to shove a bit of glue in there to hold it all in place prior to stitching. So that is our zipper tab all folded and pressed in place, and as you can see on the wrong side of the zipper tab, the top side or the right side is poking out just slightly. That is exactly what I like. It means that from the right side you can't see the back and it's nice and tidy. So once you are happy with your zipper tab, pause the video, get set up at your machine. You're going to need a normal foot on your machine, a top stitching length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters, and make sure your needle is set to the needle down position. I'll see you at the machine. So to stitch around the edges of our zipper tab, we're going to use a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And what I find easiest, because typically your foot is going to want to jump off the edge of the teeth as you're coming down these sides. So I find it easiest to actually have my needle all the way to the left hand side, and then I use the center of my foot. I have a mark on the center, and that goes along the edge of the fabric. Just reduces the chance of the teeth actually wanting to jump off, and of the foot wanting to jump off the teeth. And I also use my height compensation tool to help level out the foot so it behaves as it's supposed to. So I'm going to start in this top back corner, and we're going to stitch across this folded edge first. So just placing your fabric right in the corner. We're not going to do any reversing or reinforcing. We're going to tie off our threads with a simple little reef knot and use a needle to tuck them in. And that just gives a really tidy and invisible finish to the joining of the threads. So when you're lined up and in place, Oh, I'll just move that out of the way for now. Grab the tails of your threads and we're simply going to stitch across this top folded edge using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when we get to that corner, because this is a top stitching seam again and we want it to look really good, I just manually hand wound my needle to make sure it was right in the corner where I wanted it. So from here we're ready to come up that first short side, and I'm just going to pop my height compensation tool behind my foot and down the side slightly, just so that the foot is more level and hopefully it then feeds through relatively smoothly. So when you're lined up, just stitching 1/8 of an inch down that first short side, readjusting things as necessary. And again, when you get to the bottom corner, just make sure you stop right in that corner at a 1/8 of an inch in from both sides. And then we can turn and we're going to stitch across that bottom edge of the zipper tab. So just fold up your recessed zipper panel and we're going to stitch nice and gently across the bottom of the tab. And then turn and get ready to come up that final side of the zipper tab, right back to where we started. So it's going to take it nice and slow. And again, we want to make sure our last stitch goes down right down where our first stitch was, so that they join up seamlessly and you can't tell that that's where the stitching started from. So once you've made that stitch, you can take out your zipper tab and that looks beautiful. Just check on the back you've caught that bottom side of the fabric on the fold and it looks great. So from here we're just going to pop back to our work surface and we're going to finish off our zipper tab and our recessed zipper panel will be complete. So to secure the threads from our top stitching, all we're going to do is simply take the threads on the top, grab your needle and just pass them through to the wrong side of the zipper tab, right through that stitch you made at the beginning and end, that single stitch, just like that, and then flip your panel over. Just like to tidy the ends of mine up, and then we're going to just tie a simple little reef knot. And once your threads are knotted, just take your needle again and duck them down and into the zipper tab so that they are nicely hidden. And then trim off the excess threads. And our zipper tab is complete.
And that's all there is to it. You now have a gorgeous little fabric tab on the end of your zipper. It tidies the end up really nicely, it gives a nice professional finish, and all it took was a little bit of fabric. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you've learned some little tips and tricks as well. As always, if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to contact us via the contact page of our website, or alternatively you can ask a question in our Facebook group as well. And I'll put links to both of those in the description below. Until next time, happy sewing!